So I want to give you a report on the 2023 legislative session. So it's a 30-day session. Every other year is 30 and 60 days rotating. In the past, there was only a 60-day session every other year, and nothing in between. And in that time, I want to share some numbers with you. There were over 1,000 bills and resolutions filed, 1,006. So in the House, we had 594 bills. In the Senate, 286. So we are expected to read all those bills and understand them, right? And there's a limited amount of time, so you spend the evenings reading bills and sleepless nights where I would wake up at 4:30 and read bills. There would be orders of the day for the next day. So you have limited notice and you'd have to read those bills the night before. So pretty tough. So there were 9 Senate bills and 5 House bills that passed without the governor's signature. He had signed 160 bills, but if he doesn't sign a bill, it goes ahead and it goes into law if he doesn't sign it, or if it's not vetoed. So there were 15 governor vetoes that we overrode. Every governor veto was overrode. Yeah, so it wasn't that difficult though, because it only requires a 51-49 majority. So it's a simple majority to get that done. So that was a good day. Yeah. Okay, here's a fact. Lobbyists spent a record $9.3 million during the 30-day session. In 2022, it was $8.5 million. So it went up that much from a 60-day session to this being a 30-day session. You're holding your heart. Why? One of the disappointing things, we felt like we passed a lot of good bills, but one of the disappointing things was special interests always seemed to get their way. An example was the bourbon industry. Years ago, they had agreed to a tax, and that tax pays in the bourbon country, it pays for schools, libraries, firehouses, that kind of thing. And they wanted it to get washed away. Well, they had agreed to it some years ago. So anyway, the vote, they won their vote and got the tax eliminated. That day, I was told they had 45 lobbyists, 45 registered bourbon lobbyists there to fight and get that bill done. So, special interests, the leadership works with the Chamber of Commerce and the lobbyists, and they get things done. If anyone gets frustrated because we can't get bills through, the leadership controls all of that. The leadership controls what bills get voted on. So I wrote 7 bills. I've got one restoring religious liberty bill that still might go through next session, hopefully, but the bills that we generally write don't get called. They don't get a hearing, they don't get a vote, because leadership determines ahead of time which bills are going to be voted on. So it's a little frustrating in that regard. Yeah. But we just have to try and keep plugging. And we've got greater numbers now of people that are more independent-minded and not tied into the party. Yeah. So we're trying to do what we can. We can't quit fighting. One of the things I want to share with you is what happened at the end of the session, 2023 session. All the voting was done, and at the very end, like 10:30 at night on March the 30th, the House, the leadership kicked off 6 people off their committees. They took 6 people out of their committees, and it was just pure vindictiveness. Those 5 out of 6 did nothing wrong. So I think that's important for people to know that we have 45,000 people in each district. So times 6, that's over 250,000 people lost their voices because leadership did that, made that move. So I think that's important for the public to know what's going on down there. It's not right. And they're not sorry they did it. Next year, year, the people probably will be put back on the committees, but right now, it's not good. And 4 of the 6 were from northern Kentucky. So it's almost like they're targeting northern Kentucky. So I've got a handout there for the bills that we passed. There's a couple of things I think are important. And that Senate Bill 150, we passed parental rights, was part of that bill. I found out from a national group that we were the only state to pass a parental rights bill this year. Another one I got to work on, be part of, was the school discipline bill, 538, House Bill 538. So the issue came up in Connor with the kill list, and I was on the education committee, and so I drafted a bill on expulsion and suspension and expulsion, and they were able to merge that bill with the discipline bill, which was passed overwhelmingly. So I think it's going to go a long way to quality education and safety in the schools. And students can be removed now. They've got options. They got options.
Thank you.
Some focus next year. The Kentucky Department of Education, I think we need to look closer at what they do. I saw one statistic. In 2022, they had $62 million in salaries. So my question is, math and reading skills are down since that was established. When KARA was put into place, that's when the Department of Education started. And all the scores are down, so what are they doing? What good are they? You know, it's not right that we're paying all that money. It could go to the classroom and the students in the local schools rather than the bureaucracy. So the administration level is too high. I saw a chart with students and teachers, the money that goes to them, and the administration was like straight line up. So they're just building on the bureaucracy. Mary Ann Proctor's priority is certificate of need, and that's something we need to look at. St. Elizabeth has a stranglehold and a monopoly on the northern Kentucky, the whole region, the entire region. In Cincinnati, we've got different hospitals. In Indiana, they have choices. Lexington has multiple hospitals. Louisville has multiple hospitals. But we've got only one. We're talking about level of care and life and death. So this is very important that we need to deal with that. Schools, people ask about school choice. So we couldn't do anything this session because of a very bad Kentucky Supreme Court decision. And so we're going to pass a bill this coming session to put it on the ballot for 2024. Ballot measures only are in even numbered years, so we can't do a ballot measure this year, so it'll go on next year's. So, all right, Senator Schickel's going to have a few words for you.
Thank you, Steve. My name is John Schickel, and it's my honor to serve as your state senator. I can't believe it, but I just finished my 15th session, so I've been around a while. And before that, I'm a retired policeman, U.S. Marshal, Boone County Jail, or Florence policeman. I can't hold a job like this. Except this one. Except this one, right, yeah. And I never planned on being here this long. So I've been around a while. Steve is brand new, and he's doing a fantastic job. I want to congratulate him on getting a 100% rating by the Kentucky Family Company. That's quite an accomplishment to do that in the first year of the legislature. Every vote's pro family. A couple things. Next year, we have the road plan. Every other session we deal with the road plan. And my focus next year is going to be almost entirely on that road plan. Because in Boone County, as you know, we're a growth community, and roads are very important. So I'm going to be watching that road plan very carefully. In fact, I'm going to be meeting with county and state and city officials, we have the county commissioner here, which you can hear from in just a minute, but meeting with them to get our priorities in order to make sure that Boone County and Northern Kentucky is taken care of in the road. A couple of things about the session. I guess just maybe one little nugget I'll give you, and then I'll let Chet talk, because it was an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and that's education. We have a thriving homeschool community in Boone County. And every year it gets larger and larger and larger. And statistics show, and this is an amazing statistic, but it's true, I researched it. And we had people from Northern and Thomas More and UK admissions officer testify to this fact. They are the best prepared students for college of any students. Private schools, or public schools, private schools, Catholic schools, they are the best prepared students. But yet they can't get any financial assistance from the state, from what we call KEYS money, to go to college. So last session I focused on that because we talk about education, and here you have a group of people who are high achievers. Their parents are absorbing the whole cost, the state's not paying for anything, and yet they can't get 1 penny from the state for college assistance. So we got that bill through the Senate, but it's stopped in the House, and Steve talks about special interests. Other groups got KEYS money that were backed by different organizations. But those homeschoolers, there's thousands of them in Boone County, couldn't get 1 penny. I've talked to Steve about this, and we're going to work together on that next session to correct that problem. That's just one area. Another focus, and this will be the last thing that I like to focus on, is small business. Most jobs are small business, not big corporations. Most jobs in Boone County, the majority of jobs are small business. And we have to help small business. One of the things that we did accomplish this session was to help our small farm wineries. What's a small farm winery? Believe it or not, there's 4 of them in Boone County. They're old tobacco farms, most of them, that have been turned into vineyards. We have about 20 of them in Northern Kentucky, 4 or 5 of them in Boone County. And we changed some laws so that they can self-distribute to local restaurants and things of that nature to help them, because they really need our help. Steve talked a bit about the bourbon industry, and he and I might have a little different opinions about the bourbon industry, but one thing you can say about the bourbon industry is it's thriving. As is the craft brewers. They're thriving. They've literally rebuilt our urban core, the craft brewers have. And that is because of language, which we changed in our laws 11 years ago. We want to do the same thing for our small farm wineries to help transform rural Kentucky. And with that, I will turn it over to you, or to Steve, or who's next?
You ready?
Come on up, Commissioner.
My name is Chet Hand. I'm one of the 3 county commissioners here in Boone County. Technically speaking, I don't necessarily represent this district, so I come from District 2. But in a commissioner form of government, we have to come from our district, but we're elected and we represent countywide. So even though I come from District 2, we represent all of Boone County, including this Hebron district area. So what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of updates on a couple things going on in the county, and then specifically talk about some Hebron area developments. And I was really hoping you're going to have a thing I can present where I can show you the county GIS map. I can't, so what I have in front of you, everybody should have a couple of documents because this is what I'm going to reference. The first one is going to be very colorful. And then the other one is going to be 2 pages. It's going to have a number of projects on it, and then a back page which has a map. Most people focus very heavily in the news on things going on at a federal level, at a global level. But what most people don't think about is the fact that most of what impacts everybody on a day-to-day basis is actually local. So county government and your local city governments, they control a lot of things that impact you on a day-to-day basis. And we really don't see in Boone County that much participation in the local government process. We hear a lot of complaints after the fact, but we don't see a lot of proactive participation. So one of the things I want to talk to you about is how you can be most effective at one of the #1 complaints that we hear. So keep those handouts, and then before I forget, in the back of the room before you leave, you either have my business card and there's a yellow notebook back there. Jot your name and email down if you would like. All the projects that we talked about today, I have all of the detailed files for these, electronic files on a download link. So if you send me an email, I will send you that link so that you can download the files and you can see the site plans, what the buildings are going to look like, all the documentation for these are public record.
No.
So if you put your email down on that piece of paper or send me an email, I'll send you that link and you can download those files for more information. As far as county stuff goes, budget's kicking off this week actually. All of those meetings are open forum meetings for their caucus meetings that the public can come and participate in. This is where we drive the money and all the spending for the county. Luckily, Boone County is doing very well financially, but this is your opportunity to have input on the budget. That starts this week, actually, Wednesday, Thursday, starts tomorrow at the fiscal courthouse. Feel free to look up on our county website. We actually have all of our fiscal court meetings listed there along with the budget caucus meetings. Communication is probably our #2 complaint in the county. So this past, I think, February, the full fiscal court, which is the 3 commissioners and the judge executive, sat down with all the senior staff of the county, and we held a strategic planning session. And one of the things that I brought up in that session was the fact that we don't, in my opinion, this is my opinion as a county, we don't do a very good job of communicating to the residents of the county what's going on in the county. Communication is a gap for us, and luckily the rest of the fiscal court agreed, and we have just yesterday approved the hiring of an external company that's going to come in. They specialize in local government communication strategies, and they're going to be providing us both an assessment and a strategic report on how we can improve our communication at a county level. And I think this is important, and my argument, my example was that people today are used to digesting information in 240 characters or less, pushed to their phone. That's how they digest information. We get accused a lot of not being very transparent at a county level, but that's kind of it's not really true. All the information is publicly available. It's just not easy to get to. So we're trying to look for ways that we can push that information out, the stuff that's important, make it easier for citizens of the county to access information about what's going on in the county, and also increase their ability to have meaningful input on stuff that's going on at a county level. So we hope to have that report actually done and back to us maybe even as early as July. We'll see. They told us that they could probably do it in 60 days or something like that. It happens to coincide with the fact, if anybody's read the news, that we are losing our long-term county administrator. Those that don't know, the county administrator runs the county. He runs all day-to-day operations. We actually happen to have a fairly good one of the best in the state. We're losing him. He's retiring. We have extended a contract offer to our current assistant county administrator, Matthew Webster, and he's going to be taking over as the new county administrator come August 1. But with that's going to come some organizational changes in the county among the full-time staff, and we are going to be hiring a full-time communication employee that's going to be specifically focused on communications within internally and externally with the county. We're waiting to hire that position until we have a better idea of what that strategic plan and recommendation looks like. But communication is a #2 complaint. If you would like to stay up to date on stuff going on in the county, there's an email newsletter you can sign up for, and that's stuff like, hey, picnic at this park, there's senior picnics going on, things like that. If you want to know about legislative stuff that's going on, we're currently working on maybe setting up a sign up on the county website where you can sign up for your legislators, the commissioners for a weekly newsletter or update. But for now, the best that I have is you can either give me your email and phone number back here, and I'll put you on my list. Tell me what you're concerned about, whether it's development or safety or roads or whatever, and I can add you to my email that I send out. Or you can also follow me on Facebook, even though I hate Facebook. I currently use that for communication for anybody that has it. It's really important that you guys let us know what your concerns are. A lot of times, the only feedback we get at a county level is reactionary to something going on, and sometimes that's too late. If we're going to be proactive, we need to know about the concerns in advance. So I highly recommend that you send me an email and let me know what you're focused on, what you're concerned about. That's how we can zero in on any solutions. So the number one complaint that we get is regarding development, infrastructure, and growth in the county. Number one complaint. So I want to talk a little bit today about what's going on in Hebron and how you can have meaningful input on the process. Let's start with meaningful input on the process. And I use the words meaningful input very carefully. Everybody pull out this little sheet right here. I threw this process together a couple months ago because it's very unclear to the average resident, I think, on how developments are approved, zoning map amendments are approved, and when you as a citizen or a resident of an area can have good, quality, meaningful impact on the process. Have any of you guys ever seen those little white signs they put out by the road saying, hey, zoning map or something, you know? All right, that's the tail end of the process, but that's the first time you hear about it. At that point, it's almost irrelevant, your input on that process, and I hate to say it that way, but it is. So when somebody wants to apply for a zoning map amendment because they want to put in an apartment complex on what's currently a farm, that process has to go through a review by the planning commission, and then it has to go through legislative approval by whatever the legislative body. Usually it's unincorporated Boone County. On this process, and if you have a question, just raise your hand and let me know. But on this process, the first time that you as a citizen get to have input on something is when they hold their public hearing at the planning commission. The planning commission receives an application from an owner or a developer. They want to do something, whether it's rezone their property or whether it's submitting a concept plan for some construction. They're going to hold a public hearing, and that is the first and only time that you can have input on that particular project on the record. Most people don't think that, or don't understand that. We had a lot of very angry residents last night at our fiscal court meeting about a particular development, and unfortunately, when it gets to that point, it's pretty much too late, and it's really sad to say it that way. It's really, based on the KRS, Kentucky Revised Statutes, and our zoning ordinances, every application that's processed and reviewed creates what's called a record. And that record is all the decisions are based on that record. You coming and having input at the public hearing goes on the record. Every decision made after that, whether it's mitigation, whether it's conditions on the developer, any of those things are based on that record. So if you think that traffic is a concern in your area, but nobody shows up at that public hearing and brings up traffic as a concern, it's not part of the record. If you want to have input, you have to show up at that planning commission meeting. Or, alternatively, you can submit an email or a phone call or a letter directly to the planning commission, and that also goes on the record. Does that make sense? I have conveniently given you everyone's email on this page.
Now, do you have a limited amount of time to email, call, like prior to the meeting, or what's the
Yes.
restriction?
So this whole entire process is a balance between property rights of the individual that owns the property and property rights of everybody else around. Just like statute of limitations applies in the legal system, there's a timeline that's designated by the KRS and our ordinances that if the planning commission or legislative body does not take any action within certain times, the application automatically passes. So So the planning commission is on a tight timeline. I think it's now I can't remember actually. It's either 90 days for the whole planning commission and then 90 days for the fiscal court, or it's 90 days total. I don't remember, but it's something, I'll figure that out. So there is a tight time window when the planning commission has to receive the application, review it, hold public hearing, hold zoning change committee hearing, and then pass it on the fiscal court, first reading, second reading, and vote. It's a tight timeline. So the answer to your question is yes. If you would like to have comment and can't make it, you can send an email. Remember that becomes part of the public record. Also remember that as part of the public record, anybody can see your email. So if you say something really ugly, it's going to be part of the public record.
Chet, what is the best way for the community to find out when these public meetings are happening and what's being discussed?
So, good question. The Planning Commission puts up on their website two documents. One is a business meeting agenda and one is a public hearing schedule. Those documents are readily available on their website. You can review them every week and just see what's coming up. You can also see the fiscal court schedule. The agenda gets posted on Fridays before the Tuesday meetings. You can see the agenda there. What I try to do, if I have time, is I try to publish that stuff out on my Facebook page whenever I hear about it so that they know it's coming. That is going to be a key element of our communication strategy review. How do we get this information out quicker?
The fiscal court has a Facebook page. Can planning and zoning do the same thing with those two documents? That would be ideal.
I'm going to clear up something quick here. The Planning Commission is not a Boone County entity. It is a separate, meaning it's not under the fiscal court or Boone County government. It's a separate commission. We established that decades ago, and once we establish it, we're stuck with it. There's actually no way to get out of it once it's been established. So the Planning Commission is a separate entity that does their own thing. So we actually have no way to dictate to them how they communicate, where they communicate, or when. We are going to include them in our strategic communications review and provide some recommendations to them as well. As an example, I gave them this sheet, which is way better than the one that they typed up on a typewriter that they still have listed on their website, and they wouldn't put it up here. So,
Well, I feel called to make one comment on what you're saying. It is a separate entity, but the fiscal court and the cities have appointments to that. So they do have influence on how it's run, but it's not directly under the fiscal court. It's made up of the cities, appointments from the cities and the fiscal court.
yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Senator. So the City of Union, City of Walton, City of Florence, and Boone County all have appointments on that planning commission. And my personal opinion is that it's lopsided right now. Back when that was put together, the bulk of the population of the county lived in Florence, and so Florence has the most representation. Now, we have 3 times that much in the greater Boone County area, and yet we still are limited to that original representation, but that's neither here nor there. So, going back, I put all the emails to the planning commission, the judge, executive. For some reason, actually my emails didn't show up on here. It must have been an error. I'll include this document in that download link that I give you if you want to reach out to me after this, and you'll have this copy digitally that has the emails on there. I think it just didn't print correctly. So the Planning Commission, when they hold that first public hearing, that establishes the record for a project. After that record is created, it gets sent to a subcommittee, and the subcommittee has 4 members on it, and all they do is tactical review. They review the safety issues, the nuances of that particular project plan, and they present a recommendation to the full commission. That 4 or 5-person committee recommends approval or denial. Then the full planning commission at the next meeting holds a vote to either accept or reject or modify that recommendation. In general, if the planning or the zone committee recommends it, the full planning commission will adopt it. But not always. There are times when that doesn't happen. The next thing is that the planning commission then forwards on a ordinance recommendation, a resolution, recommending an ordinance of approval or denial. Statutorily, if the planning commission provides a recommendation to the fiscal court, it takes 3 of the 4 members to overturn that recommendation. So technically speaking, we do have that ability. It's just a very high threshold to meet. If it's 2 versus 2, the recommendation of the planning commission stands. Also, when it comes to fiscal court, the only thing we can evaluate is the record. We do generally allow public comment, but it has to be based on the stuff that's already on the record. We can't create new record, and our decision has to be based off what's in the packet from the planning commission. It's unfortunate that that's the way it is. That's why it's so important that you provide your feedback to the planning commission. Technically speaking, we do have the ability to schedule and hold our own investigative hearing, which includes public comment, and if we do that, we can add to the record. But because of that tight timeline, only some projects are even eligible for that. Yes, sir.
Now, if you submit something into the record, do they have to make some kind of comment or update to that submission in order to let them know that that was considered or, impacted the decision in some way? Just not, submitting something to the record.
You mean like, okay, so yeah, if you submit it to the record, the planning commission does review it. The full commission gets every single email that's submitted in their packet. They do review it. And then when we as the fiscal court did it, we also get a copy of every single email or letter that was written. If you come up and show up in the meeting and you provide testimony, as far as I can tell, they word for word copy what you say in the meeting, and that also gets submitted to us. So we actually get to see all the public comment.
Because I was just curious, because if you're putting something on Petersburg Road, we say, we're already concerned about the high volume of traffic, this is going to increase it potentially by 25%. Yet, how do we make sure that, that's taken into consideration, reviewing
The only way you'd be able to do that is if you had your testimony in writing and you reviewed the minutes that was produced after the fact and saw that there was an error, and then you'd have to challenge that. So you'd have to contact the planning commission to challenge the official record. That'd be the only way you could do it. So the planning or the fiscal court, when we receive it, holds 2 hearings: the first reading, the second reading. First reading is the only time that the public is allowed to come in and comment. We don't usually allow it on the second reading, but you can provide testimony. It is not unprecedented for the fiscal court to overturn a recommendation of the planning commission. It does happen. It's just not very often. So it sounds, when I say all of this, that this is a very set in stone process, and it's hard for the public to influence that, and that would be a correct assessment. It's hard for the public to influence that. This comes to where I talk about meaningful input. The way that the public can have meaningful input on their trajectory of development and growth in Boone County is through a document called the Long-Term Comprehensive Land Use Plan. It's called the 2040 Comp Plan currently, and every 5 years, the Planning Commission by law is required to develop a comprehensive land use plan, which includes 2 parts: a narrative, a descriptive narrative, and a map, associated map. That says, and the one that we're going to start working on this year is the 2045 plan, that theoretically in 2045, this is what all of the properties in Boone County are going to look like. It outlines what farms are future slated for industrial, what properties are for high density residential, etc. Most people probably don't know that exists. Your realtor, when they sell your property, it's not in their best interest to tell you about it. But just because you own a piece of property and there's a farm next to it, it's a farm today, does not mean it will be a farm tomorrow, basically. So it's really important that the people come in when we do those the comp plan review and have input on that, because that's the long-term strategy document. When the planning commission reviews an application, the first thing they go to is the comp plan. Is this consistent with the comprehensive land use plan? That is where we have input. The last comp plan review we did, and the fiscal court and others will tout frequently, that we had record public input. Over 400 people were there. I guarantee you 300 of them or more were special interest groups and developers. The people just don't participate. And also, even if each one of them was an individual resident, it's still only, less than 0.25% or 1/8% of the county population. So part of our strategic communications plan is going to be to inform as many people in the county as possible about this process coming up this year, so that you guys can have meaningful input on the comp plan, where you can go in and say, this area over here that you have slated for, 100 apartment buildings, we don't want that. We think it should be something else. That's where you can have your meaningful input. I will communicate that out to anybody that puts their email address on that paper when that process starts and how to have input on it. In my opinion, if anybody believes that we have too much of this or too much of that or not enough of another thing, this is how you get involved in that. That's the first step. When the comp plan is built and put together, it starts with goals and objectives established by the fiscal court. The fiscal court says these are our, right now I think it's like 3 pages long. These are the goals and objectives we have for our county. The Planning Commission takes that and develops a plan around those goals and objectives. It's my intent to have as much influence as possible in this next go-around that we slow the trajectory of development in our county. And I want to be very clear with how I said that, because a lot of people like to say all the time that I'm anti-development, and I am not. I am not anti-development. But I think that the growth trajectory we had 30 years ago with 40,000 people in our county is not sustainable today with 165,000. We simply need to slow the trajectory a little bit and think a little bit more carefully about how we're developing all of our open land within our county.
Is there some ratio that the county works with in their plan for number of residences and number of employees? Businesses?
There are some formulas there. Boone County is just kind of unique because the entire western side of our county is almost unusable. But that square acreage is factored into our overall density calculations. So it just happens that it's all concentrated on the east side of the county. So the math is not 100% accurate there. So, comp plan. Really, really, really important that you as citizens, my sales pitch, you've got to be involved in that comp plan. Anybody here have a problem with traffic, development, or anything else in Boone County? Yeah, now's the time to have that input. It's starting this year. Any questions about the process and meaningful input? Chet? Yes, sir.
I just want to make a comment, if I might, Chet. I want to make a comment about this process because I think it's really important. Chet did a great job of outlining how to have input. But the fact of the matter is, people have lives, they have jobs, they have other jobs. If they wanted to run the county, they'd run for county commissioner or judge executive. If they wanted to run the state, they'd run for the state senate or they'd run for. It's our job, the way I look at it, and I know Chet feels the same way, his job to represent you all. And what you all, and we should have a pulse on what you all think because we're elected. That's why I don't mind, and I know he feels the same way, we don't mind butting heads with special interests. Because our special interest is you all, the public. Good. Because we know that you don't have time, or at least a lot of you don't have time to go to meetings, to do this, to do that, and the way we look at it, that's where we come in. So let us know. Maybe not, at least the way I feel about it, not every little detail, but what are your values, what's important to you? Because that's what, at least, and I know Chet's the same way, that's what we try to do. Thanks.
Yeah, and I use those numbers. If I have, I don't usually talk about the specifics, but if we have something going on, if I say I got 40 emails from residents, that means something when we go into court over those things. Let's see, any questions on process?
Well, not process so much, but I know we're talking about the 2045 plan, so it's too late for 2030 and 2035 and
That's a good, I see where you're going with that, so,
40.
good question. So I had a question one time, I've spent many hours with the planning commission, and one of the questions I asked him was, on the 2040 comp plan, it shows that this future property is industrial, but I see a building going up today. Why is that? Because I thought this was the future land use plan. Their opinion is that as long as an application comes in and it's consistent with that plan, for the most part, it'll get approved. And I asked him, okay, so tomorrow, if an application comes through, is that too soon? Well, that's too soon. Okay, when is it okay? They can't give me a number. Long story short, if it's on that future land use plan and it's consistent with it, within reason, they're likely to approve it. And I think the planning commission, by the way, does a very good job. They're very talented people that work there, and they do a good job. They also approve every exception that comes through. We're going to talk about one of those, the Graves Road project. So they approve every exception that comes through, with every exception, without exception. So just because there's limitations in place does not mean that they will not approve an exception. Yes, sir.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, somewhere prior, they saw this vision of all these apartment buildings popping up.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so who did they intend at that time to put in all these apartment buildings, which could increase anywhere from 10 to 20,000 people? I mean, so somewhere, I guess my point was this an Amazon thing for them to say, we need all these apartments here to coincide with their expansion? Which is supposed to be now 23 to 25, which is now pushing to 25, 27.
Yeah, I can't specifically say that at all. But there are some national metrics that are used or some recognized metrics that are used nationally to determine growth rates. So they look at job availability, they look at infrastructure development, state plans for roads, etc. And by looking at all that, they come up with numbers: 6% growth, or 3% growth, or whatever it is. And by using those projections, they can project out what they think the zoning needs are going to be to meet those requirements. That's generally how they do it.
But somewhere in there, somebody saw, like, let's throw out 2010. They said, man, by 2025, I want to have all these buildings built.
I don't think they look at it by project, so they're not looking at it by building, they look at it by density. So they look at number of acres or plots of land, and they say, based on the population expectations of the county, we think we need X number of parcels or acres zoned urban residential versus suburban residential, etc.
And I can dig you on that, but where do we draw the line from single family homes to stacked housing?
So anybody can actually look at the future land use map, which is available on the County Planning Commission website, and see what the future plan is. And as an example, my property, because I own a 25-acre farm down in Walton, my property is slated for high-density residential. I said over my dead body. So I don't know why they do that. How can you plan that in the future when you don't even own the property? I've had this argument.
Because they can't. Because they can't. They label it, and that's what they're doing.
All they do is they look at a future projection. So here, that's one of the reasons why that comp plan is so important. You know, in my opinion, I've looked at a couple areas over near me where I say the future land use plan shows this whole corridor is industrial. But I don't agree with that. I think that there's a point where it needs to be cut off so you can have residential and then pick up on the other side. So we're going to address that in the comp plan and just change the future land use plan.
Hey, Chad? Oh, sorry.
I think, I'm gonna tag on to what he was saying. I think it's kind of a surprise to probably many of us to see all these big, expensive apartment complexes going up here, there, oh, there's another one. It's kind of an anomaly for our area to see apartment complexes going up that big, that many, this quick.
So
Yeah.
here's my theory on that. I cannot speak for the developers and I cannot speak for the property owners. But I did bring this up at a fiscal court meeting last night with whatever his name is, the guy that runs the Building Industry Association. In my opinion, the reason why that's happening is because when farmers or anybody is looking at their large acreage properties, they're factoring in their head payout and industrial rates. So industrial property is bringing $250,000 to $350,000 an acre. Why would they sell it for $40,000 an acre to a residential developer if they can get $300,000? So the industrial development property values are what's driving other people's property values. They can't make money at $40,000 an acre with apartment buildings, but if they sell it for $200,000 an acre, they can still build apartments and make money. So that's my theory. And then I challenged the court last night that we need to look at our growth rate in the industrial space, because that's directly impacting, in my opinion, affordable housing costs in the county, because that's the driving factor for property sales and development. The building industry guy wanted to say that nobody can move into single-family homes anymore because there's none available, they can't afford to. And I challenged him and said the reason they can't afford to is because nobody can afford to buy a $400,000 acre piece of property and put a house on it and still sell it affordably. So I think it's a vicious circle there. Any other questions on process?
I want to know, how is Boone County utilizing the Inflation Reduction Act in the planning process? Because we can literally put solar panels on everybody's houses at the cost of the government. We can plan for more sustainable future if we make money by the government.
So I don't know anything about solar panels.
I have solar panels.
I'm just saying, I don't know anything about the process for application or doing it. I know a couple people that have done it, but I think that that's done not through the county, but through the Duke Energy, because there has to be a special
With the
metering
Inflation
process.
Reduction Act, it doesn't go to Duke Energy. With the Inflation Reduction Act, it goes to the government, so that would be you. So you would have to talk to, you would be applying for that specific grant from the federal government. And I have solar panels, I don't have any bills throughout the summer.
So the question is how is the county utilizing the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah, that's government
Specific-
funds for governments.
Specifically for things like solar panels
Or
and things that reduce-
installing electrical vehicle charging stations.
So I do not have an answer for you on that one. I just
That's
don't know.
something you need to look into,
If
because
you
like I
could-
said, it's basically a blank check.
Yeah.
The fact that we can be putting these things in, which will in turn increase the value of the area. I know when I put my solar panels up, it increased the value of my house by 4.6%. Don't have any bills during the summer. Our bill in January, in December, we have Christmas lights up to $16. Putting EV chargers up. If the county or the city or whatever owns those, then the cost of charging.
Say owns them.
Yeah, you own them. So like, basically, if the county would own the EV charging station, and then you go, and my dad has a Tesla, he plugs it in, he would then pay a fee. The county or the commission or whoever can then get that money and it can be used for road maintenance. So not putting in electric vehicle charging stations that are owned by the county, that actually cuts into revenue that we could have made.
Here's what I would say on that, if you don't mind. Either grab my card and send me an email with your specific request, and I'll follow up and find out. 'Cause
Also,
I
that
think
truck
there's,
stop in Florence is awful.
yeah.
They just put that, who put up that big concrete slab? Because that's made the situation worse. Because now you can't turn left.
But if you, like I said, if you send me an email with your specific, I'll follow up, find out. I think there's a planning commission element to it, but there's probably something else to it. What I will say though, from a philosophical standpoint, especially, at least for me, I think some of the rest of the fiscal court agrees the same way. We are opposed to the county owning more property and assets. I think that property and assets should be owned by a private party, not by the public sector.
So what about like meters?
Again, I don't think the government should ever compete with the private sector. So if
Okay,
there's an
but-
opportunity, if there's a demand there, the private sector should step up to fill the demand. That's just my high level philosophical view, not necessarily specific to that issue. Yes, sir.
And getting back to communication, sorry, I'm a little hoarse. So at these meetings that you were talking about, is there like some sort of like online way to participate in that?
Yes,
And how
you
can
can.
you get that information?
So you can communicate, or you can watch the fiscal court meetings on TV or through streaming, I think. Both options are currently available. You can also show up. You can watch those remotely. The planning commission meetings, I'm not sure, but I do assure you that it's going to be. The planning commission ones are? Okay. So the planning commission meetings apparently are too. If not, it'll be part of our comm strategy.
Yeah, that'd be really great.
Yes, sir.
related to this 2045 that you're talking about, and associated with it. And related to Graves Road, I know there's a few different things that are already going on there, like that, the Levi building and stuff. Obviously, things like that, or industries or warehouses, is not what we're looking for in the future. So, how, I guess, that's something that's already happened. Like you're saying, we can already put in now, but like I've already seen signs and stuff on properties out there that are selling for commercial and everything else.
Yep.
I mean, between now and whenever the 2045 is effect, I mean, we have warehouses out there now that are anything like, I mean, I think we're kind of looking for it to be more of a.
In my opinion, poor planning and poor decision-making are going to lead to some collateral damage, and I would consider that to be collateral damage. Unfortunately, it just is what it is. I just can't stress enough the importance of Hebron as a community being involved in that planning process when it comes up. It's that critical.
And with that, Chuck, you said that we would, put our grade now, you would get us the information as far as when that starts and stuff.
Absolutely.
What other, I guess, what other methods are being taken to get that message out enough that there would be more than 300 people or whatever there to see stuff?
Currently nothing is being done to get more people involved in it. That's what I'm saying we're going to do, or at least I'm pushing an effort to get it that way. First thing I can do is just give me your info and I'll put you on my list. As soon as we get done with the strategic assessment of our comms capabilities, then we'll go from there. So a good segue into some of these projects here. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of these. Some of these I'm not super familiar with, and I'm having to do a little bit of digging on, but like I said, I've got detailed packets. Some of these are 400 pages long, but they include all the design builds for the different buildings, layouts, everything else. So feel free to give me your info, and I will send you a link to download all this. So and I apologize, I was also going to show this up on the map, but I couldn't get one printed in time. So number one is the Air Park Logistics 275. So this project is currently slated to be a total of 2.6 million square feet of industrial or office space. This is located over off of, I think it's off of 237 Gateway area, North Bend Road. There's already a lot of industrial there, so it's kind of in the middle of a bunch of other industrial. It's going to include it's not one big building at 2.6 million, it's a number of smaller buildings, still large ones, but it will also include, I think, a couple of really small buildings that might end up being like a gas station or a fast food restaurant or something for some of the employees that are working in that area. We have no idea who the tenant's going to be, so we don't necessarily know what the output or visibility is going to be around that specific area, whether it's going to be logistics or manufacturing or whatever. But those are currently going in. That file I definitely do have with a lot more information on it if you would like that. It's currently called the CDG7 project. I think Roebling is the developer. And that has already been, the preliminary plan has already been approved, and it's going to be built in phases. So it's going to be done over a few years of different phases of development. It's not all going to happen at once. Number two is Bullock Lane. So I think this is between 20 and Langley. This is another warehouse logistics building that's going in. I can't remember the owner of the property, and I think it's already been rezoned. So this was rezoned a couple of years ago, or last year. That's going to be a 230,000 square foot, same thing, warehouse logistics building. And you're not going to like all this, but I'm just telling you that's the trend here. You're going to hear a few of those.
Chad, really quick, are all of these things on the current comp plan? So 30 years ago or whatever, is this all on the current one? You said we're getting ready to start the new one. Because these are all old dates, right? So
Yeah.
these are new things that.
These are new things coming in, but it's a long process, so it takes time. As an example, the one we evaluated last night, all these residents in single-family homes are watching an apartment building going up, or going to go up near them. That was rezoned for that in 1980. So it is what it is. And I'll give you a little plug, this is my philosophy on property rights. I'm a huge property rights person. I think my overarching opinion is that we shouldn't have any zoning laws, and you should be able to do whatever the heck you want with your property, period. But we have zoning laws, those laws have been in place, and residents of the county have made decisions, investment decisions in the county based on the current zoning or future zoning of their properties. Therefore, in my opinion, zoning laws are in place and they are not there to provide liberty to the property owner. It's not to allow the property owner to do things. If that was the case, we just wouldn't have the law at all. The zoning laws exist to protect all the other property owners in the area from a strip club going up next to a church, or a big logistics building going up right smack down in the middle of a neighborhood. Those are the kind of things we zone areas so that we don't do that. If a person comes in and applies for a zoning map amendment saying, I have an agricultural one property and I want to change it to industrial, this is my philosophy, they are not guaranteed that right. They bought that property under the zoning, they're allowed to do whatever they want with that zoning, and they have equal right under that zoning as everybody else around them. To ask for a change is acceptable, but the opinion and weight of opinion of all the surrounding people and other property owners is weighted heavier than the applicant. Meaning, if all the other neighbors in the area feel that that's not a good fit and they don't want that rezoning, and they say they don't want it, that opinion is more weighted heavier than the application, if that makes sense. That's my opinion.
How does that work with vape shops?
I'm not talking about specific tenants or specific use cases. I'm talking about the zoning. I don't know what zoning is required for a vape shop. I'm assuming it's some sort of like commercial 1 or commercial 2. I'm saying that if you have a residential zone property and you want to convert it to commercial, then if all the neighbors around you that also own residential properties don't want it to be commercial, their opinion is weighted heavier than the applicant's. There's no guarantee.
So I want to go back to your example of you said that the zone change was done like 1980. Is there no kind of limitation where you have to use it within a certain amount of time, so they can just sit on it indefinitely while everything around it changes to a point where you may have all residential around it, you have something that doesn't reflect the current community status?
That is possible. The only thing that has a time limit on it, or any sort of condition like that, is if you want to change your farm to a commercial property with a 5,000 square foot, commercial building. That is a condition of that zone change. You are required, you and anyone else that ever buys that property is required to develop it with a 5,000 square foot building. If you want to change it to a 60,000 square foot building, you have to go back through the process, because that is a condition of that zone change. So there are some limitations there, meaning if they changed it back in the 80s and they said we were going to put in a vape shop, but now we want to put in apartment buildings, they'd have to go back through the process again. Now the zoning still stands, but the concept development plan will need to be reviewed.
Seems like there should. Sorry about that. Seems like there should be some kind of
Talk to your legislators
time
and write that.
Yeah.
There you go, Steve.
So, if you take a look at the property at Long Green, and you see that it's commercially zoned, you have different categories, commercial 1, commercial 2, commercial 3. Okay? What is the best approach as a citizen right now to say, well, we would like to stop the factories or the warehouses, we need to see more food or, shops, along this, for people just normal living, and grocery stores, convenience stores, whatever it be, instead of these warehouses. What's the best approach as a citizen now, today, to see that our opinion is taken into consideration?
Undeveloped land, currently undeveloped land? Yes. The comp plan. So in the comp plan, within our goals and objectives, we can state 4 specific areas we want to see X, Y, or Z. Not specific to the sandwich shop, but we could say we want to see these types of developments or mixed-use developments in that area, like the Hebron area, et cetera.
And with that, so somebody tomorrow bought, so say Amazon decided to buy all the rest of that. Would our input at the comp plan be able to stop them from doing that?
Unlikely. The problem is, this goes to the property rights thing. I told you my philosophy on application to change. But if you already own the property and you bought it and invested in it and it was zoned a certain way, you should be allowed to do what you want to do with that property within the law. And the law clearly outlines what is an acceptable use for those zonings. Now, there are some caveats to that. The Planning Commission does look at things like curb cuts and accesses, traffic, the type of traffic that certain types of buildings would bring, things like that. And for certain reasons that are allowable under the law, they can restrict certain things. So as an example, you might say you want to build a building, but the Planning Commission can put conditions on that building saying, or that development saying, these, 5 or 6 different types of use cases would not be acceptable. A common one is I see them put almost in every single one that a crematorium is not allowed. Things like that they can restrict as part of the initial application.
So what hoops would one have to jump through to put a truck stop on Graves Road and is that happening?
I am not aware of a truck stop on Graves Road at this point. And I'm not sure what they would have to do to get there.
So now, let's just talk about commercial. So now with like the 2045 plan, like those areas that are commercial, they're showing on there now as being residential. Not that we can't do it, but residential. Then that's on the 2045 plan. But if someone goes and buys that land in 2040, even though that's on the 45 plan, they still would be able to, if it was commercial.
Yeah, you're talking about timing. Basically, if it's on the future land use plan and it's consistent with the future plan, even though we haven't hit that point yet, it'll get approved. That's future instinct, basically.
You were asking that in the land use map, is that how we can look now to see what's
Yes.
coming up in
So one of the
2030,
tools-
2035, 2040, the
So
done deals?
one of the tools I wanted to give you, and I think Jill put it on here, if you go to the Boone County Planning Commission website, just type in Boone County Planning Commission, will bring it up. On the left side of their menu, they have the GIS site. That is an interactive map. And you can zoom in and zoom out, you can see, and then you go up on the right and you can select, I'll show you how to do it if you want on this monitor later.
Yeah.
But you can select every single property in the county and see exactly what is going on with that property. You can see who the owner is, how it's zoned now, how it's planned to be zoned in the future, and if there's any ongoing current applications, even if you haven't seen anything yet on the street, you'll see all that documentation. It's all public record.
Is the county going to be doing any kind of a traffic study on all this stuff? I mean, eventually, there's going to be so many people moving in, we don't have the infrastructure
Yeah,
to
so
grow.
the county doesn't do its own traffic studies that I'm aware of. We usually put that on the developers. So if a developer wants to come in, we require the traffic study from the developer. The caveat being that if you have 10 properties on the street and each one applies at the same time, we only evaluate the traffic on current conditions, not what the future condition is going to look like with all of it. I know it sounds ludicrous, but that's the way it is.
You need to think of.
Yep, doesn't make sense. Any other questions?
One more question. I'm sure there's a lot, and we can't tell what's going where, whatever, there's a lot of planning and it's zoned a certain way. Is there a plan though, and forgive me if I don't understand or know this yet, but is there a plan for, the community? I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure and there's a lot of manufacturing and warehousing and a lot of this commercial industry going in. What about, and this is just a for instance, like Union has got a city going in that is going to be for the residents, something to enjoy. Is there anything in Boone County aside from the city of Union say over here or the Burlington area, and then kind of plan that way, something for the people that are currently here,
Other than big business.
other than big
Because
business.
everything
I mean,
seems to be going
yeah.
towards big business.
Technically, it would be the comprehensive land use plan. That would be where you would see those specific community outlines. I don't even want to mention this honestly, but the way you could technically exert more control would be to incorporate yourself as a city of Hebron. Personally, I'm against that. I think that more layers of government is a problem. It also brings in more layers of taxation. The real solution is to leverage your existing governmental entities to get the same objective across. And I think we're working towards that. Communication, transparency, and a more viable growth trajectory. But it doesn't happen overnight.
A follow-up to what Chet's saying is that I live in the city of Union. The city of Union was created to control zoning. That's exactly what that was the only reason it was created. Just like the fiscal court can overturn zoning, doesn't very often do it, so can a city. A city of Union, the city of Florence, they can overturn, now they have to go by the record, they'll get sued if they don't, but they can overturn zoning, so, and there's all kinds of reasons not to do that because you pay more taxes. But that was the reason it was created, so a small group of people could control the zone.
However, I would love for somebody to send me an email and say in the email, can we have a targeted Hebron community area, long-term development plan in the next comp review, so I can put that on our radar.
Done.
Well, I said you work for Burlington too while we're at it.
Yeah, I think it's already in there, but I don't think it's real specific. We might make it more specific. All right, so a couple other development projects going on. Cougar Path Townhomes off of Cougar Path. Those are actually attached single-family residential dwellings and an office. That one is the former library site. It's going to be basically townhomes. That has already, the major site plan's been reviewed, but I don't think anything past that's been done. So technically, if they don't start any work on that, that's going to expire in 2 years.
Is the animal clinic disappearing? Is that what you do?
I think it's right behind the animal clinic, or right in front of it. It's right next to it. Let's see, Hebron Station, that's right next to the, I think it's right next to the Hebron Fire Station. 256 apartment units, some commercial space. That's not 100%, the preliminary plat plan review is still going on. But that's definitely what's going on. That 4 acres of commercial space along 237 is undefined. So that's going to be just vacant space. And if they come back in the future to put any commercial in there, whether it's a restaurant or something like that, that's going to have come back to the planning commission for approval. So we don't know what's going to go in there yet. And it is going to be 3-story buildings. So one of the things that I've challenged the planning commission on and the fiscal court on is the height of the apartment buildings. And I get it, they're looking for max profit and revenue, max use of their space, I guess I should say. Max use of their space. But 3-story apartment buildings are much more difficult to hide. They don't blend in as well as 2-story apartment buildings. So in some places where you have that mixed residential, where you got some single family and some multifamily, that 2-story building just blends in a lot better with the single family residences than a 3-story does. So we don't have a lot of control over that unless the planning commission decides to use that as a condition. And sometimes based on line of sight, from different roads and stuff like that, they lay out the cross-section maps. Sometimes they'll put those in as conditions that it has to be a 2-story building, not 3. The real big one is the Levi Strauss building, also known as Project Rooster, if anybody's heard of that one. This one's a sore spot for me. I'm really, all of this actually happened before I caught up with this report. This one bothers me, and I use it as an example of how the planning commission approves every exception. So the Graves Road study limited that entire section of area to, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I thought it was like 350,000 square feet. So no building that went in there can be over 350,000 square feet. When this initially came to the planning commission, I sat in all the meetings in the back where nobody could see me, and I listened. And The entire planning commission was against this proposal because they didn't know who was gonna go in there. As soon as they found out that it was Levi, everybody was for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
the
saw that.
limitation on that study was a max 350,000 square feet. They're putting in 1.5 million square foot building. We're talking 5 times the limitation. And that was the exception that they approved. So that's why I say every exception gets approved.
With that expansion right there, is there any intent to let lane in or out on the grades? Is there any plan for that, so that one way in, one way out?
It's that extension of Living Lane.
I do not remember now. I remember that coming up as part of the discussion.
It
I
says it
think-
here, Chet, it says an extension of Litton Lane. On
Uh,
number 5, Levi Strauss,
okay, the answer is yes.
and extension of Litton Lane. I don't know where extending it to, but
Yeah, so that building is gonna have a lot of work done to it. I will tell you that the developer, in their defense, did a very good job of repositioning the building on the property to have as little impact as possible on that neighborhood. The original plan was literally in their backyard, like right up against their houses.
And by the way, you spoke very well at that meeting when everybody was there talking. I was dang glad I voted for you. You got up there and handed it.
I wasn't in it.
No, but you'd already
You're on
won.
the cusp.
That's what I represent tonight.
Yeah, so that one kind of bothers me, but it is what it is at this point. The only thing that still bothers, the one thing that still bothers me about that is one of the neighbors in that area saw some people out there doing some survey work, went out and talked to them, who said they were surveying for Amazon. So I have a feeling that they probably just didn't know who they were working for, but if that happens to be the case, I'm gonna lose my crap. Because that is, there's no way that is a straight lose.
Yeah, really.
So other things, Williams Road Apartments, number 6. So you guys know there's a map associated with this on the back that shows you kind of what we're talking about. So number 6 is up by Williams Road, other side of 275. Another big apartment building, 416 apartment units. This one is actually an out-of-state developer from Cincinnati. It's currently under review, and the original zoning was done as part of the Graves Road study. Which one? Oh, it's an out-of-state developer from Cincinnati, and I think it's called Hills Development. The whole project is still under initial review. The access will be directly off of Williams Road, and it'll go down the new Graves Road intersection. And the zoning was covered as part of the Graves Road study. So Rivers Point Estate, number 7. I think this is supposed to be kind of mixed use, so you're gonna see, and this one, if you look at the map, and I can show this one in the back, this one is a phased development. I think there's already some homes in there.
Yeah.
It's a mixed
Right
use.
homes.
Yep, it's mixed use, a single family, multifamily, commercial. All I'll say on that is, there's a lot of expansion gonna happen with that one. So there's a lot more buildings on that particular property. I think those are higher end homes too, I think. Sitting up on those. Yep. Ellis Road Industrial. Ellis Road Industrial is up by, down on the other side, off 275. That one's gonna be another big industrial warehouse building. There's 2 other industrial lots next to it, I think, that are future planned. And this one was approved last year. It's gonna go in. Number 9 is Hamlet on the Bend. This is a smaller commercial space. It's like a mixed commercial and residential. And they've actually submitted some changes to that one, so I think that one's still being discussed.
What changes did
It's
they?
right in front of.
I don't know. They've submitted a change of concept development plan, so they're looking at.
So on the Hamlin's website, it says it's bankrupt. What does it take for them to continue and put all apartments and not have any?
It's up to the developer. I mean, they're the ones that come up with the plan. The county or the commission doesn't dictate to them what they put in there. We can't.
Don't they approve the plan?
We do, but it's only if it's consistent with the use of that zoning. So if the zoning allows for it, we have to approve it basically, with some limitations.
So they can change it if it was apartments and then commercial use, they can say, no, we're just gonna do apartments.
As long as that's an allowable use, they can do that, yes. Number 10 is the Woodlands. And that one is over by Tanner Road. This one's residential lots, mixed use, single family and townhomes, condominiums. This has been approved for a couple of years, at least the original plan. And I think this is going to be access at the new Graves, or at the roundabout at Graves Road. Those are the projects that we're aware of in the Hebron area. If you, like I said, if you want any of the specific documentation, I'm going to wrap this up so we don't stay here forever, but if you want any of the specific documentation, I got the full packets for most of them. Send me an email, I'll send you the download link and you can download them. That's all public record. And if you want to talk tonight about any of them specifically, we can bring them up on the computer or the TV there.
Real quickly, how does this impact schools with all these apartment dwellers, which could be single family?
Yep, so school evaluation is done as part of the planning commission process. When somebody submits an application, the planning commission sends an email off to all the major partners, fire district, schools, SD1, some others, and they ask them for input on the project. They give them the initial plan. Generally speaking, the school use is just a metric by single room, 2 room, and 3 room apartments. They usually see this, so they've got a percentage number, some number that they use to calculate how many kids are going to roughly be in there. 3 room apartments is when you tend to see the high impact to a local school district.
So this will go into their plans for renovations and building out.
Yeah, and actually things like SD1 saying we don't have the sewer capacity, the school district saying we don't have the school capacity, or the fire station saying we have access problems are reasons for them to deny the
Do they ever
application.
do that?
I've seen some denial before, yeah.
So, question I have is about, traffic flow. You said that you, as the directors, you don't get into that, that's done by the people that are submitting the plans. And my question is, how do you monitor what they submit in their plan? What is the rules that make them so that they're not just dumping out in the middle of somewhere where it's going to cause so much conflict? Because in this area, and I know all of us are seeing it, there's so many trucks already. And it's causing, you go down the Florence and you try and get across that interstate on 18, and there are trucks stopped in the middle of the intersection during traffic lights. They should be ticketed. There should be cops down there handing them out tickets, because it is not just a traffic stop, but it is a problem for safety. Now, with that being said, I understand what's going on over there. Okay, that's the way it's laid out, that's the way it's planned. But what are we doing in this community, in this area, to protect ourselves from a reoccurrence of that situation that's already in place? And we can see poor planning right there, right in front of our faces, and each and every one of us have to live with that right now, and there's not a dang thing we can do about it.
And here's the thing, the trucks, when there's no room for them to park, they're actually pulling into parking lots of local businesses and taking up spaces and cutting off their ability to run their business functionally. I live on Goose Drive, which is like just across.
Right.
It's a nightmare.
So the questions that were brought up were about traffic congestion issues, semi-trucks and stuff that are parking in place they shouldn't be. So there's a new truck stop going in off of Richwood, right where I live. I'm not happy about it, but it is what it is. There's a new truck stop going in off there, and I believe there's been some discussion about a large truck stop off of 275. The idea being that by providing that space, we relieve some of the pressure on some of the other tertiary roads. If you have somebody that's or an area that's a consistent problem, you can contact the sheriff's office and they will ticket them. Same with if they park in businesses they're not supposed to, they actually get towed or ticketed. So that there is some enforcement element there, but for somebody that's
Well, why do I have to pick up the phone and call my Boone County Sheriff and my Florence Police Department, we are packed up for miles and trucks are parked in the intersection trying to get into that stupid truck stop. Why isn't there a cop there taking care of business already? Why aren't they preempting this? Why is it something you have to blow up? A citizen like me or you or I have to sit in traffic, I have to pick up the phone and call the police. I understand that when we're dealt that hand, we gotta live with it. My biggest question is, as a county, as a group, what is being done in the 2045 plan to provide us protection as people that live here, that we don't have to be concerned that what's going on over there is going to be right over here?
I'm just going to default back to my earlier statement of it's critical to be involved in the comp plan. Absolutely critical. And those are the types of input items that can come up as part of it.
We need to be a little more proactive instead of reactionary about these kind of things.
So when it comes to enforcement on things like code and stuff like that, the county's position right now is to not go out and seek those things. Like code enforcement, stuff like that on buildings, we don't go seek those things. We, or the county, I say, reacts to citizen complaints. An example of that is often lots of neighborhoods by the zoning are not allowed to have chickens in their backyard. But if somebody has chickens and all their neighbors don't care, and in fact they like the chickens, guess what? They keep having the chickens and the county's not gonna show up and force them not to. Unless somebody complains about it. What else?
In your email, are you gonna list us or send to us the meeting that we can go and vote for the truck stop? I heard one you said off 275, I hear what you said for the truck stop.
That's just something that I've heard. I actually don't have any specific project or location information on that. It's just something I've heard that they're looking at trying to put in a truck stop off 275 west bound this area.
Once again, my statement. What are we gonna do to protect it?
Hey, Chet.
Yes.
So number 7, 9, and 10.
We'll make this, folks, we're gonna make this the last question, and then I'm around until the last person leaves to answer anything else.
7, 9, and 10 are all in this area. So if we go out and look at the land use map, will we see if they've done any traffic studies? Because if they keep expanding, you have the two roundabouts and they funnel them all still into one lane, and yet we're building all this. So will that show a traffic study, or if they've made any plans to change?
If it is part of the record,
If it's
the
part of the
answer will
record.
be yes.
And if not, then we're really screwed because they're just.
And as illogical as it sounds, they are 100% reactive and not proactive on that stuff. They don't build up the infrastructure ahead of time. And they like to use this example, I think, somewhere else in the state where they built some big road and then old economy crashed and nobody came out there, so they spent all the money and nobody came out there. I just think it's a bogus argument.
But you said that they take into consideration the schools and the fire department and
And
SD1.
they talk to.
Why don't they take into consideration the traffic?
They do. If it hits a certain threshold, so if they look at the project and they say, based on industry standard or calculations, this is the amount of traffic that's going to be produced. If it hits a certain threshold, then it automatically triggers a need for a traffic study.
But did they look at all the developments at the same time?
No.
I mean, because it
You already said that.
you're looking at all
already
these
said it.
separate
They just-
ones.
That's the
They
key.
do not, and that is, in my opinion, a flawed process. So, I said last question, so let's talk in just a second. Last thing I'll leave with to see if you want to.
One more bill I wanted to mention. The first bill we voted on was very nice because we lowered income taxes from 4.5% to 4%. So Kentucky's moving more to a consumption-based tax. And we're gonna, if it meets certain guidelines, it'll go down 0.5% each year. And we're compared to Tennessee, which has been thriving compared to us. They don't have state income taxes.
Yeah.
So we're trying to copy Tennessee basically. So if we meet certain guidelines, it'll wash down to nothing. So that's what we need. I've got legislative updates that go out routinely. So if anybody wants my legislative update, let me know. And Senator Schickel does too. He had to leave early, but if you want his updates or mine, let me know.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say for all of us too, all three of us, is that they go down to Frankfurt. I go to the fiscal court. Last night we had a few people there for one topic, but the entire rest of the 4 hours we were there, we didn't have a single person sitting in that room. It's really important to be involved in the local government process. We do listen if you call or email us. I always answer my phone and emails. If I don't, I'll respond back, so leave me a message. And these types of events right here, I gotta say, I really appreciate you coming out to this, because it's hard to get this kind of feedback unless you guys proactively get out to us.
But you gotta come to the meeting.
I mean, kind of means, or send me an email or call me out, and everybody's busy, like Senator Schickel said earlier, everybody's busy, so.
Why don't you bring somebody from the planning commission with you?
They wouldn't come.
We don't control them.
They wouldn't come.
Just a suggestion.
Yeah,
It might get killed.
but it is a good idea. Actually, I sat down with them for a couple hours planning on this, so. All right, thanks for coming.
Thank you.